Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening. Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio. Hey, good afternoon. It's the 13th of March, and it's turning out to be pretty nice outside. And last night it was bitter cold, like bone-chilling cold, and it's not like that right now. I'm appreciating that. So you remember it was like a month ago, you came over and I made hot pot? You remember that?
Yep.
Okay. So there was a Napa cabbage that I used, and a portion of it, the heart that I never even used, was sitting in the fridge for forever. And so I finally chopped the bottom of it off because it was dying and it was all rubbery. I chopped the bottom of it off and I threw it into a piece of Tupperware and put some water on the bottom of it, and it started to come back to life. And
Whoa.
yeah, and so now it's got a root system, and the heart has sprouted into little flowerette things, and it just keeps growing out of the center of it. And now the leaves, instead of like soft and delectable, they're kind of tough, but they're also really robust, and they're feeding into this bloom in the center of the freaking Napa cabbage.
Imagine if you could do that with a human. That's fucked up that you can do that with a plant. Like something that was on your plate about to be consumed.
That I forgot about, and then it's still growing. What the? I didn't know you could do this with a cabbage. That's the coolest part.
Yeah, that's new to me. I know you can do it with like potato, but yeah, I know there's other shit you can do it with too. Like even
How about you can do it with celery?
I think that's one of them. I feel like there's actually a lot of plant, like, because it's like anything that's like a root vegetable.
Yeah,
like
this thing
onion,
just sprouted roots out of the bottom, and I chopped it clean, like, with a sharp ass knife. I just chopped that thing and put it in the container, and it was all, like I said, it was kind of rubbery, and it took it about 3 or 4, maybe 5 days before it started to firm up, and then here we are, like a week, 2 weeks later, and the thing has sprouted flowerette little thingies, and it's growing. Wow. It just keeps growing out of the center of it. I am so impressed with this.
Crazy.
I'm in like cabbage master mode. Like I'm trying to really learn about this, but I realized I probably don't have the resources to, mass produce cabbages.
Well, I mean,
but it was going to be thrown. I was going to just throw it away. Then I decided, let's see if this works. And I could have eaten it at any point, but I just wanted to see how far it went at this point. And I'm just going to keep going until it dies, I guess. I don't think I can eat it. I think it's too tough at this point.
that's crazy. Yeah, well, you have enough space that you could at least get a few.
Well, yeah, eventually, but like, I don't know what the next phase of rejuvenating a cabbage is. Like, what do I do? I plant this somewhere outside? Does each one itself turn into its own cabbage? Like, what the fuck? I guess so. I got to just keep going. I'll eventually move it into a larger container. Hopefully, it turns into like a bunch of small cabbages. That'd be really awesome. Like, seriously, if it was as simple as like taking a cabbage and taking the bottom like 3 inches of it and chopping off the very end of it, or just leaving that intact and just putting in some water, and then it turns into a bunch of other cabbages, and people didn't know this because nobody talks about it or something. Nobody talks about it, and this is like an actual thing. Then, man, shame on everyone for not sharing this shit. But but if this is like a thing that's like, hey, anybody can do, holy crap. So I want to find out, like, if I can turn, like, the heart of a cabbage into multiple cabbage, or at least one. I probably won't be successful. I'll be cool with that, though.
It's great. We're still using some of the pesto from last year's basil. It's
Oh, that's
always
crazy.
interesting to see how long that shit'll last.
So I made a homemade curry, and I used corned beef, and it turned out pretty well. But I used tomatoes from 2019.
Oh wow! Did you freeze them or
Yeah, they were frozen,
freeze dry?
but
I don't know if you like
I think they were stewed
dried
originally.
them. Mm,
I think they were stewed originally and then just frozen in bags.
yeah, it's interesting how long food can actually last in the freezer. Like we ate some salmon that was from January, like 2 days ago now, and it was like fine, nothing. Didn't get sick at all. Some of the flavor was lost from the original saucing, but it was like replaced. Like that was fine then, because then it was replaced with a new sauce. But you know, it got turned into meatballs, so it was like,
Ooh, fish balls.
yeah, it tasted really good. But that's where I I think the freezer gets underutilized by a lot of people in a way that it makes it easy to not overeat when you actually like use the freezer. Because then, for example, with a frozen pizza, like you can just cut it in half before you cook it and leave the other half frozen instead of cooking the whole thing at once. And
Oh,
it's
that's like
like,
a frozen pizza hack of epic proportions.
yeah, and it's like since doing shit like that, it like makes it easier not to overeat because the food that is like not being used stays in the freezer.
Holy crap. Man, that's like an industrial food product hack. Like that's so like an intelligent, man. Holy shit. Like I'm serious. Like you just blew my mind there. Like it never had occurred to me. It's like I'll buy a bag of chicken wings and I won't cook them all at once because that would be absurd.
Right. But with the pizza, you're just like, oh, I'll cook it all at once because it comes whole. Well, no, you don't have to because you can just cut it.
Oh man, that's
And
like
like,
that's the reason I needed to get one of those pizza cutters that looks like it belongs like in a Star Trek, like on a Klingon warrior's hip.
well, even still, you can just use like a regular pizza cutter.
Well, I know,
You
but I
just have
want
to
to.
like, you just have to be soft with. It's almost like 4 or 5 moves through. Like you just like
Oh, like you're
go
cutting
with.
fiberboard backing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like you just go slightly more pressure every stroke through,
Yeah.
and then it like eventually, because it's frozen, it'll just snap, and it snaps perfectly along the line that you create.
Oh, that's so smart. I love it. I love it.
But it definitely like, when you have the other half of that pizza sitting out there, and it's like, well, I'm full, but that pizza looks really good. It gets rid of that. It just takes that all away. And sometimes I don't feel like eating pizza like for the whole meal. So it's like I'll do pizza and soup or something, or pizza and tater tots or fries or some shit. And that's way it's like a lot easier to rationalize eating fries if I'm not eating a whole pizza. I think pizza and fries is an underrated combination. Everybody always goes
I
breadsticks.
mean, pizza is just an open face sandwich with a
Right. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's an open face hot sandwich. So it's not like fries is out of the spectrum of sides.
No, it definitely goes well with the palate. Um,
Well, especially since they're like barbecue chicken pizzas with barbecue sauce instead of marinara, or white sauce based pizzas that approach complexity of like a Philly cheesesteak. They're just open faced. So an entire pizza, that's like, I mean, it's a calzone, so it's 1.5 full size submarine sandwiches. Maybe 2.5 Subway footlongs. That's like a pizza worth of sandwich. So fries or chips, or I think tater tots is good too. I haven't had tater tots in a while. So when I was in high school, there's a place called Taco John's that used to do this thing called potatoes ole, which was basically tater tots instead of chips for nachos. And these are quite possibly the best. Like, I don't think it's a Mexican dish, but it was delicious, and it was at a taco place. And that's one of those things that I can make pretty much anytime I want, but for whatever reason I don't. Probably because deep down inside I know it's not good for me.
Yeah, I think that's part of it though, is like when shit is too good, you know it's not good for you.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oop, I think I can feel my heart starting to slow down. Not in a good way.
Oh, blood pressure rising.
Yeah. Yeah, there was like a couple days where we were doing cheese sandwiches with like garlic and parsley and the butter that you put on the outside of the bread. And it was like, oh, I could definitely feel my arteries clogging up a little bit. But it was worth it, you know. It's like
Oh yeah. I mean, a good grilled cheese sandwich, it's got so much butter in it anyways.
right,
It's basically butter fried bread that you
right. But it turns out you can put garlic in that butter.
Oh,
It
yeah.
makes it a way better sandwich.
Oh, sure. I mean, I imagine you can just pre-season the butter with all manner of like herbs and seasoning, and
Oh yeah,
get
yeah,
the
yeah,
flavor into the bread way in advance.
yeah. But that's where like it just elevates. You know, grilled cheese isn't like bad in the first place, but it definitely becomes something different where you're like, okay, you can get drunk on these things.
Oh
I
yeah.
didn't know it was possible to get drunk on grilled cheese sandwiches until added garlic into the butter. Oh,
I think the first time I ever had like a really serious food buzz, it was Indian food at this place called Shanti that was downtown.
yeah, place is good.
That place was good for a while. I remember I had this. I can't even remember what it was, but I just remember it was this really. It was a really well done curry, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. And everything was vibrant. I think I got home and passed out too. All the blood like vacated my brain and went to my stomach.
Yeah, and that's where it's hard. It's hard to not overeat to that point. Um, when you have a really big portion in your at your disposal, and it's like then it's completely on your discipline, and then you feel like you wasted food because it's like if you don't eat it, it's most likely not gonna. You know, everything isn't good reheated. Um, a lot of stuff loses its uh, the texture when it dries out, and you know if you don't package it up at the right time, you know it might make the inside sweat and then get soggy if you package it while it's too hot, and then you leave it out too long and then it gets stale. So there's all these things about eating food a second time around, where it's like if you're not good about it, you can ruin your food just because you didn't preserve it correctly. Nobody wants to eat poorly preserved food, and especially when it can like make you sick. Um, but that's also where it's like proper preservation is, I think, the way around a lot of extra waste that is kind of built into the way Americans eat. Because it's like, as far as I can tell, American diet is about quantity over quality. And then it's like cheap quantity. And then if it's expensive, like the quality, it doesn't necessarily have to be expensive. But if it's not expensive, people will think that it's not quality just because they're used to things having to be expensive to indicate their quality. So it's like Americans have a really bad time.
You're talking about like places like Applebee's and Chili's.
And, exactly. Exactly.
Right.
That's exactly the type of place that I was thinking about. That wasn't like.
I was just making sure.
That's like gourmet to Americans.
Well, I think that's more like this is Americana, and it varies by location. So like in a real city, that's just like that's the entry level Americana cuisine. But in rural America, where you drive 30
like
minutes,
real America,
where you get to like
metropolitan or cosmopolitan,
but in the rest of America, where you have to drive 20, 30 minutes sometimes to get to the closest sit down restaurant, that might be the only place, and so that might be a really fancy restaurant.
Yeah, Olive Garden is like.
I mean, I don't even think
do on an anniversary for a regular American. That's like, I'm taking you out to a fancy dinner at Olive Garden. We're gonna have bottomless breadsticks and that fancy lobster pasta that I really love.
So
even though we're nowhere near water.
In the 41 years that I've been alive, I think I've been to maybe 3 or 4 buffets that I would actually write home about. But we're talking about places where the buffet bars extend the entire city block. And there are like 5 of them. There's a place in Sacramento that was like this, and it was incredible. It was the entire length of the building was like, buffet bar.
Vegas buffets. Yeah, like, that's like, okay, that's a different thing.
That's a different level. These are like different. Yeah. These are different levels of buffets. I remember going to a place on the Pennsylvania Turnpike that was incredible, and it was a huge building, and it was just buffet table all the way around. It was completely out of place, and it was worth it. It was like $15 in 2001, but it was
even the Tudor room. The Tudor room buffet sometimes it can be really good. And other times like whatever. But I could have done better myself.
But I don't think that a buffet rises to the level of like a real sit down restaurant, no matter how good they are. They might be better than like Chili's or Applebee's. But there's something about it where, because the food is just kind of chilling. Yeah. Under a lamp or on a steam table or wherever, there's something about it that's just like, it's not. It can never quite rise to the level of even the fanciest buffet will never be a fancy restaurant because of that. Because the food's just sitting there.
Well, and that's the difference where like the Tudor room. Like they'll have the chef making the omelet right there.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's the way they'll do it in Vegas, where like, if there's like a sushi buffet, the sushi chef is right there. It's not just sitting out.
Well, my understanding of like all-inclusive resorts and places like big casinos is that they will have like a steak assortment, and they'll just every so often they'll remove the steak that is, or the steak tray that has been there the longest, and just slide them all over and bring out a new set of like medium rare steaks or rare steaks or whatever. And then those.
Well, and this is like when you start doing business trips, that's when people get really like flippant about the bills because they're not paying for it. So I went when I was in Mauritius, like the government was paying for the participants' meals, and like I was, whatever that. Then you're like, okay, great, free food. But the people that I was with, they're like, let's take advantage of this, and I'm like, I've never thought about this way of approaching things. But most people who get with like the business card to buy dinners, that's how they start doing it. These motherfuckers ordered every goddamn type of sushi roll that they had in the menu, and it was like I think something like $300 or $400 worth of sushi between three people that they had. Where I'm like, I couldn't even ever imagine to do something like that. But when people get in those situations, there's like the type of person who's like, yeah, let's order every type of sushi. And you're like, I'm not that hungry. I don't care. Let's order every. They just
And
want to do it
you know,
just to do it.
those like sushi boats that are meant for like a couple. Like
Yes.
those things are
Yes,
like
we had one of those.
those things. They're like usually somewhere in like the $60 to $90 range.
Uh-huh. That was
Sometimes
just one of the things they ordered.
sometimes they're $100 to $120 depending on the place. They're not cheap, but they're not like it's not like a $200 thing or a $300 sushi order. And also, it's more than enough for two people. Generally, those are enough for like four people. Like
Well,
realistically,
and then the American perspective like starts to distort it. So like we were
that's so much rice.
in Istanbul on a school trip, and it was like everybody was used to ordering American style. So there was like um family platter, and then you could get all these things to add on. Well, it was like I think it was like 6 or 7 people that went out to dinner that night. Well, we decided, not us, but the group was like, well, we'll order everything. And it was like 2 tablesfuls. I've never seen that much food for that few people in my life. That's like, it was like, it became it felt like it was a punishment where you're like, is this a layer of hell about halfway through? Because you're like, it's not that much money, but then people are like, oh, fuck, we just way overestimated what we thought we needed, and there's like tables full of food sitting here, and nobody could like take it with them for the most part, because at this time I don't think we had like, I think it was like hotels or something about it where it was like the food was basically just gonna go to waste if we didn't eat it. So then it was like Fear Factor where you're like, you have 7 Iskandars, 3 chi kuftas, and 5 Durham donairs you have to eat in 7 minutes because this place is about to close. Go! And it's like, because they weren't going to stay open forever either. And that's where I'm like, the whole experience, I think everybody was trying to keep their positive faces on, but like halfway through it like became a punishment, because that's where I'm like thinking about it, like it was just, if it wasn't, I'm sure some of it got eaten or it wasn't all thrown away. Like there's no way they threw all of that food away, but the fact that we had all that food as like Americans and then just walked away from it, it was like, there's like a mindset you have to be able to do that, because the food was so cheap to us, it wasn't a big deal. But it was like, it wasn't bad food at all. It was just more so like, in America, you just get used to ordering like a fucking full day's worth of food in one meal.
I need 16 hamburgers, 4 hot dogs, 12 orders of French fries, 2 bloomin' onions, 12 gallons of Coca-Cola.
And this is what I mean, like anytime somebody goes to Taco Bell, it's like, if you're spending under $10, good for you. Good for you. If you can stay under $10 at Taco Bell, that's like some real self-discipline, that it's like once you get there, you're like, no, I want this and I want that. And that thing's only $2, so I want that too. And
Man,
it's like, well, it becomes so easy to end up with like $15 worth of food for a meal, and then you're like, fuck, this is like 3,000 calories.
I figured out how to get my order under $10 because the only things that I ever actually liked from Taco Bell were the chili cheese burrito and the Mexi Melt, and neither of those things exist anymore. So I just don't go.
Yeah, I haven't gone in probably it's been over a year just because they I would always go for the nachos just because it's easy to get nachos there. And then they would never have fucking tortilla chips during the pandemic. So I'm like, well, I'll go somewhere else for nachos, I guess. And then, other places, it's like a little more expensive, but they'll make their nachos or their tortilla chips every day. So it's like they're never going to run out because they just fucking make them. But that's where I'm like,
Damn,
that's
Taco Bell.
the difference between fast food and the place that actually makes their tortilla chips every day. That's why it's a little more expensive. And that's why I'm willing to pay it, just so I'm not, eating empty calories that then make me feel like I've consumed the thing. It's like a Taco Bell is the concept of Mexican food. It's not actual Mexican. They don't even say Mexican. It's like Southwestern, whatever. Even then, it's the abstract concept of it. They don't really nail it. Like they don't actually get it to that point because the ingredients are just subpar, and then on top of that, they're not fresh. So it's like it's not even the thing that they're claiming to be. It's just a poor shadow of it. So that's where I'm like, that's fine. I'm okay with eating that ever so often. I'm not telling myself that this is like gourmet Mexican food, but a lot of Americans, to them, that's like the only thing they'll ever know. And they don't even know the difference between Southwest and Mexican. And it's like, or Tex-Mex or whatever, running for the border. Well, we didn't actually cross the border with this. We ran for the border, but didn't quite make it. Taco Bell is squarely within the border.
Yeah, Taco Bell's Tex-Mex.
Yeah, so that's where that whole run for the border motto was like. It can only work on people who've never actually been to Mexico.
No, run for the border of Texas.
Yeah,
that's what it is. It's not run for the Mexican border. It's run for the Texas border because Tex-Mex food is in Texas.
Yeah,
it can't just be called Tex. It just can't be called Tex or Texas or Texan. It has to be Tex-Mex.
Yeah, there's like a clear
because Mexico used to own Texas.
But even with like Mexican street food, the quality of ingredients is higher in general than like. Not okay. Taco Bell's ingredients, you shouldn't even. It's like it's hard to even really compare them with Mexican food because like it's Tex-Mex. Because then when you compare,
I don't think I've ever had like a legit Mexican style taco at Taco Bell, like ever.
No, they don't.
They just don't make it.
They just don't make them there. And if you've ever eaten an actual Mexican style taco, then you're like, oh, this is like a completely different fucking meal altogether. They don't like what.
It's the hot
Taco
sandwich
Bell
we were
calls
promised.
Burritos are more like taco. And even then, it's not even the same type of shit.
Yeah, it's like one's a wheat flour, so the other's corn flour.
It's so different, yeah. So that's where I'm like, when you eat a Mexican street taco that's actually from a Mexican like style kitchen, it's like it would be the equivalent of like Don Pablo's in America, or like what white people consider gourmet Mexican. And that's the crazy part is like,
I think Chipotle's is closer than Taco Bell.
Right, Chipotle is closer, but even then, I don't know if
I still think
Chipotle. Do they grill their fucking shells yet? Can you get a grilled shell at Chipotle?
They have they do a griddled shell, a flat top. They don't do like a
But you have to request it though, right?
I don't know. It's been a while since I've been to Chipotle.
Because that's
I
where
think
I'm
of
like,
that as like West Coast,
I
West.
think Chipotle is even still Tex-Mex, or it might be Southwestern.
I think it's like
Like,
Southwestern or West
yeah,
Max.
yeah, and even then, Chipotle
By that I
is
mean
like,
California.
right, yeah,
Because
um,
even the food in New Mexico is way different than it is in Texas.
yeah.
I think New Mexico food in New Mexico is closer to Mexican cuisine than Tex-Mex. But then you get to like Arizona and it's definitely not. It's like
Well, it's weird. Arizona's food's weird. It's like it's definitely
that place is
its
so hot.
own, but it's got its own twist that is like southwestern, kind of Mexican, but kind of Mexican American. And that's where it is this weird. It's definitely different than Tex-Mex. Um, but I was interested to see the. I mean, obviously, there's going to be more or a different variety of access to year-round ingredients, but the combinations were even just slightly different. Where I'm
Yeah.
like, I feel like one has like slightly more sugar and more sweet than the other. Um, where and then like the the Arizona shit had just way more bacon and everything. Like just bacon everywhere.
Yeah.
Like that definitely struck me as something where I'm like, okay, I
So
can get down with this, but it is a bit much.
so this is where they're sending all of the bacon.
Right. Yeah.
Because I know that we've got loads and loads of pork farm all over the place, but for some
Yeah.
reason bacon seems to be real. Oh no, there's bacon all over the place. And
Yeah. Which again, I was very surprised by that, but um, even again, it's like within American cuisine, there's not a whole lot of variation. It's just like, oh, how much bacon you gonna use in the
I think
are you gonna wrap it with bacon or stuff it with
there's a
bacon?
whole subset of American cuisine that is not served in, well, it may be served in restaurants, in like some restaurants, but of like industrial cuisine. And you touched on it with your frozen pizza, you know,
Mm,
portioning. I think there's a lot to be said for how far things have come in terms of like a frozen dinner. Because I remember as a kid, there was like, TV dinners, and they were kind of, you microwave them and they didn't turn out right. They never turned out right because microwaves didn't rotate yet. And even once they started rotating, it still didn't ensure that they would come out right. But now we've got these TV dinners that are, once you cook them, they're actually quite incredible. Some of them are, you know, I'm not
think
going to.
about how many of those aren't American originated, like the actual dishes being cooked.
Oh, sure. But the process of industrializing them, and so that they can be turned
Oh
into this
yeah,
like,
yeah.
borderline space food, that as long as you
That's
keep it
true.
frozen, you can pull it out and either boil it or put it in boiling water, and then dump it on your plate and it's all hot and ready to go. Or you put it in the microwave and cook it for 4 to 7
Well,
minutes. Like,
but it turns out if you have a freezer, you don't really need to do all that anyway. Because that's where I was like,
yeah, you
getting
can make
back
that
to the
stuff
salmon,
yourself.
dude. Salmon lasts in the freezer for like 4 months.
Yeah.
It's fucking crazy. I had until we were like, we had a bunch of salmon that's like cooked, but it's not already frozen. It's like, well, shit. How long was it? 4 months? Wait, what the fuck? You know. Yeah. Then sure enough, like 2 months later, it's just fine. And that's where I'm like, on the one hand, the microwave industrial meal is good for people who
can't cook.
Can't cook and don't have the time to learn how to cook. But in 2022 with YouTube and like how most spaces have refrigerators and stoves and ovens and
How so many people
God
have
forbid
like,
microwaves now, like
how people have cases for their phones that allow them to stick to magnets.
right.
Just stick
It's
that
not
fucking thing to your refrigerator.
it's not the fact that they don't have kitchens that's not making people cook or making people don't think they have the time to cook. It's the notion that they're too busy and don't have time when most of their time is being spent like consuming junk information. And this is another thing where I'm like, if junk food exists, junk information is just the same with the empty like knowledge that it's like, oh, I know about Kanye and Kim. Well, good for you. That's useless information that's literally not going to do anything for fucking humanity. So maybe go learn some algebra or something,
Yeah.
So that's where I'm like, the information that people then consume, it like reinforces the notion that it's okay if you consume junk information, you can consume junk food, and it goes back and forth as to where I'm like, I'm not sure if these TV dinners are net positive because it reinforces the notion like, I don't have time to learn how to cook this Salisbury steak. I'm just gonna buy the fucking microwave TV dinner one and stockpile my fridge with them and never actually taste what a real Salisbury steak could be because I'm okay with the microwave one because society tells me I don't have time to learn what a good Salisbury steak should taste like. And guess what? It's because they make me feel like I don't deserve a good Salisbury steak. And then I guess that person kind of doesn't. So it's like, it's this fucking terrible cycle of like, hey, if you don't want to like pull yourself out of the junk, guess what? Your taste buds aren't refined enough to even know the difference between a fucking good and a bad Salisbury steak.
Oh man, the poor bastards. They don't even know.
They don't know. They don't know.
How could they?
And that's
They
where
won't even take the time to learn how to cook.
Man, I can't tell you how many times I've been pondering whether to get food that was like cooked by somebody who probably doesn't want to be there, or just to go ahead and like make something myself. I'm like, I'll just go ahead and make this fucking frozen pizza and then sprinkle some shit on it. And like, it's like, on the one hand, the industrialized has like made it possible to not have to do that other one. But then it's like, only because the other side is still industrialized, where my other choice is still, it's not really like, unless I'm willing to pay a lot extra and like wait a lot more time, it's not worth the difference in quality of like going out and having somebody else just reheat it in their fucking microwave. It's like they got some frozen shit and they just stuck it in the oven and made it seem like they were cooking it.
Most times I will opt to cook unless I've got to like buy a bunch of ingredients that I just don't have. Sometimes I'll just go ahead and buy the ingredients because then I can make a whole bunch of other things. But there's sometimes it's like, man, I don't know. It's not an issue of time. It's more that I don't have, all of these ingredients, and I'm not trying to spend, $40 right now to make just, dinner. Sometimes it's worth it though.
It's hard to cook for like two people
or one person.
Yeah.
And I'm not always trying to eat like the same thing for the next 3 or 4 days, like multiple meals a day.
Yeah, that's difficult too.
That's what necessitates a freezer.
Mm-hmm.
Another variation of the freezer that I've been interested in lately, I doubt I'm ever going to own one, is a freeze dryer. And those things, like they'll take the temperature down so low so quickly that the moisture sublimates out of the food, and so they become like vacuum sealable with oxygen absorbers in a container for, stable for up to anywhere from 5 to 25 years, depending on what they are and their fat content.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is like the extreme version of freezing food.
Yeah.
Because you have to add a lot of water back to it, and not all things reconstitute
Right.
properly. Like, but
Well, it turns out it seems like it's the oxygen that fucks shit up. But it's also the oxygen.
yeah, that's why you have to add oxygen absorbers,
Yeah.
because
Oxygen's necessary to help it cook.
yeah, oxidizing is definitely important. Holy crap! So apparently, we've been seeing quite a bit of imagery from this act of armored aggression against Ukraine, and every so often I see this. It's like this Ukrainian armored or weapons Twitter stream. I check it out, and they're showing images of like Russian tanks just obliterated, just spread out across a road, and parts of them, these tanks will be like oxidized, and part of it is like the accelerants that are used in the munitions cause such like rapid oxidation, because that's what burning is. It's rapid oxidizing. But they cause such rapid oxidation that any exposed surface that isn't treated or is getting ready to start oxidizing at all, it's just like an express rust factor. And so these are like the weak points on like the parts that survived these detonations. These are the weak points, and they would have been next to get obliterated if there had been more whatever munitions are being used. And of course, it's impossible to tell from Twitter.
Oh, and it seems like the Russian equipment's just so old too. It's like, in a lot of cases, I'm not sure if there's like treatments against that, but you would think that the more armored, the better armored stuff would be more resistant to that type of vulnerability, and that it's like,
I think that makes sense with when it's like the U.S. military, where there are documentaries that are available that show the level of maintenance that goes into like a tank, where they're replacing individual tank treads after they record a certain distance traveled per tread. They'll replace them if they start to show any kind of wear. They're pretty good about that. Same thing with their tires and their automatic air pressure regulation systems. All this stuff is like very heavily maintained, and there are crews that are dedicated to individual vehicles, and they're like, these things cost a lot to run every day, and that's just that's part of the price of freedom or something like that. But our military is heavily regulated and is there's a considerable amount of oversight that goes into every step of what goes on. They know where every cent is spent, and it's documented and signed off at various stages so that they can track these things. And sure, there's a lot of corruption, like golden hammers and gold toilets in the private contractor sector, in that whole realm, but the military itself is very, it's all on the line item for the most part, except for those weird ones. Anyways, Russia, from what I've read, is the most corrupt fucking place. Like at every step, anywhere that they can cut a corner and somebody can like scrape a bit off, they try to, and they generally get away with it. So by the time it gets down to like the people on the ground, nobody's doing what they're supposed to. They don't have fresh tires for their vehicles. They haven't been maintaining their equipment. they've all been lying up the chain. So Putin might have been told, yes, we've got the most advanced ground military in Eastern Europe or whatever the fuck they would tell him. But that's also because they need to keep their job and they don't want to die. I mean, the guy's like, he's crazy.
But it's wild. Like when you were describing it, I'm like, is he talking about America?
I mean, the private sector,
You know,
yeah.
like,
but I think that's the thing.
Saying it, it's like when you say it, when you describe it, they're indistinguishable from each other.
Yeah.
And that's the most fucked up part about all this, like, posturing and virtue signaling. It's like, it's the Spider-Man meme. It's just the Spider-Man meme. That's all this is.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here like, when are y'all gonna stop bombing? And it's like, it's wild to see Americans just start ignoring the war on the weekends as if that shit doesn't happen on
Of course
Saturdays
it doesn't happen on Saturdays and Sundays.
You would think that the fucking Russians stop bombing on Saturdays and Sundays the way Americans just start ignoring that shit when the weekend hits. I mean, obviously, it's had to go on for a while now for it to happen over a few weekends. But goddamn, Americans just shut that shit down. And back on Monday, what do you think about Russia? Well, it was still happening yesterday, but you seem to just want to talk about other stuff yesterday, so I thought we were done with it. It's like, but then it's like, well, another black person got shot, and they're like, well,
so
let's talk about Ukraine, though.
I have a feeling that this will all conveniently wrap up before September, because that's when the regular season for NFL kicks off. It's in the 8th of September. That's my prediction. That's I imagine that's when this will all, at least in America.
Well, and that's where I'm like,
wait, when does baseball? Baseball's is happening.
Our government literally passed an aid bill to Ukrainian armament before they passed more COVID support. It's wild to see Americans. We're still in a pandemic.
April 7th is when Major League Baseball begins. It might actually be over before then. I'm sorry.
But to see, like, Americans and by proxy Russian military industrial try to get back to business as usual and during the pandemic, and then the oil companies just, all right, we're going to take our money too.
$13.6 billion. Holy shit.
Because then I'm like, all the people that could be doing remote work is the easiest way to fucking hit oil companies right now. We want to, like, not use oil. Fucking stay home. Remote school. Keep your kid at home. Everybody stay home as a family and fucking just don't use your car. Don't fucking go out to a fucking comedy show this week. You don't need to go to a comedy. There's fucking war in Ukraine. You want to go to a comedy show? You want to go see the fucking Batman while people are getting bombed? Okay, I guess you need to go drive your fucking car and then come complain about the gas prices because you couldn't keep your fucking ass at home and not go see the goddamn Batman. Not you, obviously, Tia. But it's like, that's why I hate fucking English. There's no goddamn hypothetical. God damn it. And that's where I'm like,
there's no you all but not you individual.
Exactly. God damn it, English, making it more difficult to discuss hypothetical fucking.
And of course, these people is actually too nebulous.
But again, there's these people, same people that couldn't stay their asses at home and had to go out and see fucking No Way Home. I gotta go see Spider Man. I gotta go see Spider Man. Man,
They're just
these fucking people, those are the people that are why our gas prices are continuously through the fucking roof because they need to be in public smelling other people while they watch their fucking movies and making sure other people see them laughing while they're watching their movies so they know I enjoyed Spider-Man. You know I enjoyed Spider-Man because you saw me laughing. I can't enjoy it in the comfort of my own home because I need to make sure somebody else sees me laughing.
well, nobody would
I want to
believe that
feel
they
like an
saw it
influencer.
if they weren't seen there. They have to be at the theater, otherwise they can't prove that they saw the movie. They have to have the movie stub or the ticket stub. It's for their scrapbook that goes online on their Instagram feed. Without proof, what are hobbies, right? You know, can't just have a room with all of your stuff that you've assembled in a collection. That's not enough anymore. People have to know about it, apparently.
Well, and then these fucking idiots don't realize their dollar's losing value. So it's like the same people who are now like, why are gas prices so high? And it's like when everybody was remote and everybody was at home, the fucking gas prices dropped really low. And people were like, I want to fucking go get some gas and put it in my trunk and put it in the freezer and save it. And it's like,
Plastic bags
this is your
of
dollar.
gas.
Do you remember people were doing that shit?
Oh man, I remember seeing so many pictures on the internet of people's cars kept being on fire because they put it in a container that wasn't approved for fuel transportation.
People were putting gas in plastic bags. Just straight up. That shit was really happening because remote work and fucking people staying home make gas prices get so low. These fucking idiots thought that you could just go, I'm gonna stockpile gasoline myself, even though I don't have a fucking a storage tank that's like suited for
Man, do you remember
combustible.
Do you remember the first week of pandemic lockdown, how the air started to clear up, and by the end of the first month, there were jokes about how we could see the universal sign floating above in orbit? Like, it only took a month for the air to start to clear up, like, appreciably. It only took 2 months before.
It was really nice, actually.
Yeah, it was great. It only took 2 months. By the third month, I think people started to forget how bad it was.
Yeah.
And I think that most people haven't been to a place like, most people in America have not been to a place like China where there are significant portions of the day that are blocked out by smog. Because there are 1.4 billion people, and they've got a lot of cars. And I don't think most people, even LA, it's at the worst smog that it ever has, like all day long. That's what significant portions of the eastern seaboard of China were like.
I remember in Istanbul living there, it was like I didn't smoke anything at all, but when you'd walk on the street, there'd be so much exhaust and brake dust that by the end of the day, you'd be coughing up black shit. And that's where I'm like, living in a city
that's rough.
It's toxic. It's toxic. It is a cancer. It destroys your body. And it's the shit. You don't even have to be smoking, and you're going to be coughing up black shit just by proxy of the fucking air you're breathing not being clean because it's filled with fucking brake dust, oil, and whatever the fuck. Who knows whatever the fuck else is in that shit.
Man, I wonder how many people get lung cancer from living in a city and never smoke ever, but they still end up with lung cancer.
I'm sure a ton. Well, because that's part of it is like, if you look, when we were looking at the lung cancer numbers, the ones that were getting it where it was men and women, it wasn't from smoking, it was from the industrial runoff.
Yeah.
So that's where it's like, yeah, you can tell it's these fucking cities. It's causing lung cancer because they're not able to breathe clean air. They're never able to breathe clean air, and they're not even necessarily smoking. And they still end up getting fucking lung cancer. And that's where I'm like, I know after living in it, it's like That's why people are like, why don't you live in Indianapolis or even or Chicago? Fuck that. Fuck that. I like my lungs. I like breathing.
Yeah. So on a similarly odd end of the industrial spectrum, apparently places like Norway, where they have high concentrations of lithium in the mineral composition of their geography and geology, there's also lithium in the water.
Oh God. Oh Jesus Christ. So that's why they've been glowing at night.
Yeah, which casually explains why people in Nordic countries are extra chill.
Jesus. Wow.
Maybe that's not so bad. Maybe that's a place where maybe that's why doctors used to say, "Oh, you should live in the mountains," because certain mountains had lithium in it, and living in those areas calmed people down. And it wasn't because they were like in the mountains with extra fresh air or away from other people. It was literally the lithium content in the water.
Huh. That's interesting.
Because
Well, and that's like a lot of the there'll be these mythological springs or something, and then you realize, oh, people accidentally inhale methane or something, and it makes them fucking hallucinate. Yeah, if you drink this water, you'll feel like amazing. Well, it's because there's lithium in it.
I mean, you don't want to drink the water in like the Netherlands or Seattle because they test for positive for like benzodiazepines.
Well, yeah. I mean, that was the drug runoff in our water supply became a real. I mean, I don't think they fixed it.
I think
People flushing drugs down the toilet like started.
when that became a thing, like, no wonder.
I mean, not because people are like trying to get rid of them, but like if they're
because their prescription is expired and they
exactly, and they'll just toss them, or they're like, or throwing them into landfills, and eventually seeps into the water. So it's like, I mean, not the landfill, but if somebody like is illegally throwing trash into the ground and not an actual landfill.
Every so often I read about,
which happens a lot,
dude. I read about this, and it's one of those things that it's not a regular enough thing that people seem to have to be up in arms about it yet, but they should be, because if I've driven through the country at night and then inadvertently driven over someone's trash they just left in the road, and if you're lucky, it doesn't get stuck to your exhaust system.
Yep.
But if you're not lucky, you end up with like melted trash bag dragging trash, potentially spraying their garbage all over the underside of your vehicle, and some of that, becomes hot shit. It's horrible.
People in Indiana will just throw their bags of trash off on the side of the road. It's fucking real crazy.
Sometimes
that shit.
Sometimes I think they're just idiots, and a bag of trash fell out of the back of their truck. But sometimes you're right; they literally get out and just toss it in the side of the road.
Mm-hmm. I think it happens way too much for it to be accidental.
I mean, one of my buddies was telling me how
all the time.
One of my friends was telling me how out in Greene County, by the edge of one of their friends' roads, they found a bunch of wood with nails just sitting right on the edge of the road because some asshole was driving around dumping nails in the side of the road like a piece of shit. So yeah, it's definitely a problem. There are definitely some assholes out there who don't see a problem with that kind of behavior. They just suck at life.
Yeah, Indiana roads are really bad for flats. Like Bloomington isn't so much specifically, but almost the second you get outside of Bloomington, it's like whether it's potholes or fucking debris, it's really easy to get a flat tire in Indiana for some reason.
think that there, this is my conspiratorial brain at work. The people that run the snow plows are siblings with the people that run that are the contractors who do the asphalt laying. So during the winter months, those assholes drive around and destroy all the roads so that the next year their brother-in-law or cousin can go and bid on replacing the road surface. And of course, it takes several years for them to sufficiently destroy a section of road that, it makes sense to replace it. So it happens slowly enough that people don't they don't notice. I don't have any proof or evidence. I haven't been documenting the trucks that go by with their plows, and I just hear them scraping the shit out of the road. Yeah, writing them
fuck the roads up. But I'm still convinced that there's like a construction conspiracy to just keep construction on the entrances and exits to the cities so that they can do the extra ticket charge for the construction zone.
Oh, yeah.
But it's also like keeping people within their cities, like, because a lot of it ends up affecting the truckers. So it's like then you have to stop in their cities to fucking piss or eat food. And it's like this intentional slowdown forces people to then get stuck in their stupid little cities' economies. And as part of it is like too many American cities' only source of income is taxing people on the way through one way or another, whether it's like trying to pull them over or giving them a fucking automated speeding ticket so that you end up getting it in the mail and they never even have to pull you over, or it's like there's like a slowdown and then you have to fucking get your gasoline there or get your food there or use the bathroom there and make a pit stop there. Something that ends up drawing you into their because our infrastructure is so poorly constructed that when you can't like just hop on a train and get somewhere in a reasonable amount of time. So it is quicker to drive or take your ass to the airport and then get stuck in that local economy where then you have to pay $15 for a fucking sandwich and $7 for a bottle of water. And you can't bring your own because they'll just take it and throw it away because you're hostage there. And it's like, I just remember after a while, it felt
they
like
rotate the number lettering system in the parking lots every week too. So when you get there, you park at E9, but when you get back, it's like G13.
But it like when you cross into an airport, it feels like you're in this zone where everything is arbitrarily just 3 times more expensive, and you can't do anything about it. No matter what you try, because even if you bring your own food, they'll take your shit and throw it away. And it's like the weirdest removal of autonomy where you have autonomy over certain things that you don't even realize, like where you buy a sandwich or if you can just buy the ingredients to make your own sandwich. Because it's like it'd be different if you could just if they had like a grocery store in an airport where you could like buy the meat and then buy the bread and make your own fucking sandwich so it's not that expensive. But no, they sell you the pre-made sandwich that's been sitting there for 3 days for like the ingredients, the cost of all the ingredients and more in a way that then becomes like if sandwich were good, it'd be different. The sandwich isn't even all that good, but the only reason you're buying it is because you're stuck there for fucking hours and you end up being hungry, so you're a hostage to your fucking body's needs.
You're right. It hadn't occurred to me, but every sandwich I've ever had at an airport, it always felt like yesterday's sandwich. There's always something about them that even if they're, they say they have the sticker that says "made fresh daily," but It always
They didn't
feels.
say which day.
Yeah.
It didn't say made fresh today.
Oh, oh.
Yeah.
There,
Even in the restaurants, like you'll go to the Wolfgang Pucks and the Jamie Olivers, and it's like $35 hamburger. That's a sad ass hamburger where you're like, this doesn't look like the one that was on the fucking menu either. Yeah. Um, I'm just but that's in America because then you go like in like
I
the
think an
food court in
airport.
the Turkish airport is just ridiculously good, and it's not even like gourmet. It's just really good food, like because it's in Turkey.
I think the airport is going to be the first American institution where it is widely accepted that we have automated Sentry laser defense turrets at all at access points. Like, even from the one off of the interstates to that limit access to the actual airports themselves.
Mm.
I think these will be the first places where it's widely accepted because heaven forbid some terrorist group managed to land in America and then get out, they're going to have to shoot them. Because this is America where
I mean,
they shoot everyone that doesn't like immediately get calm and compliant. And even if you do
well,
get calm and compliant, they still might shoot you.
I've been to airports where they do bomb checks underneath your vehicle and will are like armed with AK-47s at the gate. So it's like,
Yeah,
there are places where
it's serious.
they do that because it's necessary, whereas America will like not have it be necessary, but then implement it because they want you to be scared, and that's the
Yeah.
difference.
I mean, obviously I've only read about these kinds of horror stories, but of people going even to like, what is it, El Al in Tel Aviv and having their laptops like destroyed on site with a firearm because they wouldn't relinquish it to security.
Mm-hmm.
Reddit's good for that kind of story, but some of that might actually be true. Someone might actually be really, they might be suffering from extreme exceptionalism and lose their laptop to airport security. And
Yep.
American security is less, publicly violent about it. They take people behind closed doors into a secure room or something. But I think that American airports will be the first place that we really actually start to see like an increase in any kind of like armed presence, where it'll just be like, yeah, this is just standard now. That's a kind of a bleak prediction, but we're on the verge of World War III, and I don't think people in this country who are all like bomb the shit out of them, or just advocating war. I don't think they realize that American involvement in this kind of thing is just we're at the doorstep of World War III. We're not. It's not like we're dealing with some non-nuclear power here. Russia has hypersonic cruise missiles. We can't catch their cruise missiles. China has hypersonic cruise missiles. I mean, we do too, of course, but we can't catch them. We don't have there's no anti-hypersonic Patriot missile out there. So these fools are playing a very dangerous game.
Well, and yeah, it's like this is based on the notion that the Bible gave apparently white men dominion over everybody else to make these decisions. Because it's like at this point, basically two white dudes holding the world hostage, and it's like what are we gonna do about that? You know what I mean? What can we do about that? Where it's always two fucking white dudes holding the goddamn world hostage.
Oh.
What are we gonna do about that? What are we gonna do about that? Because I'm like sick of being like a black man that has to watch white dudes hold the entire world hostage, and then America get shit on because these white dudes want to destroy everything. And that's why I'm like, I'm American. There's like no way around that. This is not my culture. This is like a very specific, like angry white dude who doesn't care about destroying the rest of the fucking world, doesn't care about exploiting everybody, doesn't care about holding everybody hostage. Same type of shit Putin's doing. So fucking these two white, like at this point, is not always these two same white dudes, but it's always a fucking white dude. Like even Margaret Thatcher didn't get to this point. Like, yeah, Margaret Thatcher exploited the fuck out of people. Margaret Thatcher did a lot of horrible shit, but Margaret Thatcher did not get to this point. So like, let's not make it seem as if like maybe Hillary Clinton would have got to this point. I don't know, but it's Joe Biden. It's another white dude. It's another white man. If it would have been Trump, it would have been another fucking white man. What are we gonna do about that? Like, if we can't even fucking acknowledge it, is there any way we can even do anything about it? Because that's where I'm like, how do we get to the next election and not have another two old white men as our fucking final choices? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I just know in my heart that when we come around to the next election cycle, it's gonna be like, oh, they're gonna entice us with some like LGBTQ person in the primaries, and then there's gonna be
but it's gonna be
Kamala
Biden versus
Harris.
Trump again.
Right? Yeah, and then it's gonna be two white dudes as our choices, and then we're gonna have to like act like
We're gonna have to act like nobody else can figure out a solution.
right? Yeah, as if only these two white dudes are capable of solving the problems, because then when it comes down to solving the problems, their only solutions are let's bomb them. So how do we get out of this white man bombing shit cycle? Because it's like it ain't nobody else. Like
well,
no
obviously we've got to bomb them.
It's not the fucking Chinese, man. It's not the Chinese government. Like that's not them. That's not their fucking MO. It's not the fucking Nigerian government. So what the fuck are we gonna do about it? And that's why I'm like, I know by proxy of me even saying it, I go on the list here because we're not even allowed to talk about this shit while the fucking let's go support Ukraine war propaganda is being forced on us. Like they're just like ramping up all this propaganda to get Americans ready for some fucking form of war, whether it's a proxy war or
it's like Cold War 2.7.
It's not a Cold War anymore though. We're past Cold War. We're in a proxy war now because it's gone hot. Like it's gone. There's no more cold here. It's hot. So it's like, how hot does this war get is the problem. And the issue is because the original Cold Wars, proxy wars, but never became visible in America, it was like all hypothetical, even though there were actual hot wars happening. Yeah. And that's where now that there's a hot war in Ukraine, we're past the Cold War shit. That's already passed. Like that was technically it should have been passed in 2014, but everybody kept it out of their vision. So we still technically stay cold until now. It's like, and this is where I'm like, I don't know if it's possible to take it back cold.
I don't think that there's a return for Putin.
Right.
I don't think he can go forward. Like there's no trade with Russia with Putin. There's no way that just continued sanctions that just hurts the European economy as a whole because until they can get out of their reliance on Russian
Do you think white people are willing to let other white people be sacrificed to a war of attrition to beat Putin? Do you think that? Because I'm not sure, and I think they're using this, but they look just like us angle to goad these people into fucking World War III, yet again taking all the rest of us non-whites hostages because they can't not get involved if it looks like them. Because that's what I'm seeing. That's the thing I'm feeling. Because then it's gonna be a bunch of fucking people of color in the fucking militaries fighting to save these white people that they couldn't help but get involved in. Because it's like right now they're saying, "Oh, we're not getting involved," but you're sending them fucking weapons. That I mean, I'm not saying like I guess they need weapons, but should we be signing monetary support for weapons when our fucking infrastructure is falling apart? When we're not getting COVID support? When we're not getting fucking either like any more talk about student loan? Like they're quicker to solve Ukrainian need for weapons than the student loan problem here. What the fuck happened? How are we fixing Ukraine or trying to help fortify Ukraine against Russia before y'all figured out the goddamn fucking problems you came in the fucking administration talking about? They came in talking about student loans. That's how they got in there.
Yeah,
and now we're in
Manchin
Ukraine?
got all up in arms about that shit too.
Yeah, and then that's where I'm like, on the one hand, they're negotiating with the fucking Republican terrorists who constantly just want to undermine any sort of real infrastructure building in America. Meanwhile, these fucking Republicans are worried about like what Disney's putting out and shit. Like, we're on the verge of World War III. Y'all worried about fucking Disney TV shows? It's bullshit. They don't actually care about these things, and they're just fucking using inflammatory subjects and rhetoric to keep people in their cults, because then they don't even solve. It's like black people are worse off now because of the inaction towards teaching of black history, support to black like historical preservation, the things that our government should be doing to make up for the shit that they specifically fucked up relative to black people's connection to their history. Not only are they not doing anything about it, they're letting Republicans actively make that disconnect worse and make the public more unaware of the history by saying they're attacking CRT when they're just attacking anything to do with black history.
You just reminded me of something that Carl Sagan wrote, and I just pulled it up. He wrote, "Science is more than a body of knowledge. It is a way of thinking. I have a foreboding of an America in my children's or grandchildren's time when the United States is a service and information economy, when nearly all the key manufacturing industries have slipped away to other countries, when awesome technological powers are in the hands of a very few and no one representing the public interest can even grasp the issues, when the people have lost the ability to set their own agendas or knowledgeably question those in authority, when clutching our crystals and nervously consulting our horoscopes, our critical faculties in decline, unable to distinguish between what feels good and what's true, we slide almost without noticing back into superstition and darkness." And he's describing a modern technological dark age. And I think that you just kind of described all of that.
This gets back to the junk information.
Yeah. There's so much junk information that unless you are educated in research and identifying actual information, because you're a specialist essentially. It's just difficult to put anything to sift anything out of it.
Especially the more the person gets wrapped up in the junk, the less likely they're to look for anything of substance because they're no longer craving information of substance. They just want the junk information anyway.
Yeah.
So they'll like overlook the substance information to get the junk. And then they'll actively ignore this substance information. And then you get people who are like, "Oh, I want to go see the Batman," while there's a fucking war. And it's like, I'm not trying to shame those people, but I'm not trying to shame those people in the sense of like, there is a sense of if a person's able to sort of disconnect themselves from so much of reality and ignore it, that person then becomes part of the reason that the problems persist because they become part of the apathetic, ignoring, unwilling to observe that then reinforce the notion that nobody cares. And it's like, they may not be racist. They may not, hate anybody, but because their apathy is all anybody sees, it doesn't matter what their motivation for apathy becomes. They just look like they don't care about that issue, and then that issue persists as a problem. And that's why I'm like, it's really just like the people that I thought were ignoring everything for the sake of their psyches. I was more okay with that than realizing that like, oh, they're just like ignoring black people stuff or ignoring the problems that Native Americans have. And they're completely willing to like empathize with white people's problems, like if they're in Ukraine or some shit, and they understand the problems then and they're willing to look at it then. It's like, I would have just rather thought you were just ignoring all of it instead of realizing like, oh, you're only willing to look at some of it because this other stuff is too damaging to your psyche and there's nothing you can do about it. So then it makes it even more difficult for you to look at it because then you realize what these other people have to deal with all the time and then you just shut down to it. So it's like,
it's easier for them to imagine themselves in that position,
right?
Because
exactly,
they can't imagine themselves being a person of color.
Yep. Because they know as soon as they start trying to imagine what it's like, they know they wouldn't want to be it. So then they're like, I don't even want to think about that. And then they stop thinking about it, and then nothing ever gets done about it. So that's where I'm like, it's like
it's
very frustrating.
There's got to be a name for this. Like when it's like it's a variation of Pandora's box, but when you open it, it's just screaming like the most terrifying sound possible. So you immediately shut it and then put it on the back of the top shelf in the closet that you never use with old jackets that like you inherited from your grandparents. That's where that box goes. And then,
but it's like black kids and Asian kids and like, kids of color don't really have the option to ignore this stuff. They never really get a childhood because they constantly have to deal with this stuff. And then if they don't deal with it, they're more vulnerable. And that's where it's like, that's why it's like black people and people of color live in completely different realities than white people because white kids can ignore this. Like their parents can, erase this stuff from their books and like they don't have to grow up learning about all the stuff that happens to people of color in America to the point that now we're having laws created to make it so that if a white person feels uncomfortable, they can like get rid of, it's not a federal law, but these are happening in states. So that's why I'm like, these these literal whitewashings of history are happening in real time in a way where if the white left was more aware of it, they would be more proactive, or I guess now reactive, against the far right who's doing it. But they don't know enough about French colonialism or fucking British colonialism for that matter to understand how much that stuff has happened in other countries, to understand why that's important to colonialism, imperialism, and creating distrust within minority communities by proxy. It's like you have to sow distrust and lack of knowledge of self within communities to make them go look to the white communities first before their own. And that's like the 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 thing that colonialism has perfected over centuries, but it's also perfected whitewashing the history so you're not aware of it.
We are now your colonial masters. Quick, bolster our economy so it can withstand the onslaught. Like, I think there's a portion of the world that just wants to engage in, reasonable commerce and be successful and doesn't want to go to war. I'm sure there are a lot of people that don't want to go to war. They're like probably like, doing the pearl clutching things like, please don't do it. Just don't do it. Just back off. There's still time. Everyone can recover sort of maybe in a couple of years if we just stop now. But I think that there's still a delay. Like, it's one thing to live or exist essentially on the frontier of information, where ideas change rapidly because new information is discovered and shared, and people can provide different perspectives so we can have a better understanding of all the things. But I think that there's still a general delay between when the frontier of discovery decides, oh, okay, this is what's going on, and then it starts to feed into the general public who aren't necessarily paying attention. They're just waiting to be told what's going on. And so it's interesting to me how a lot of the stuff that we see, a lot of the information that we're being fed from the media and what is emerging from like Reddit or TikTok or Twitter, it's just interesting to see it happening in real time, or at least the main propaganda machines functioning in real time, and then how it bleeds down into the mainstream media. And I would like to think that here we are, I don't know, how long has the news been on, how long have we had televised news? 50 years? I mean, longer than I've been alive.
I guess about 70 now, right?
Sure, that sounds good. Like, at this point, we've all been indoctrinated to accept these modes of information delivery as the news. But I'm not sure we can really even... I'm not even sure we can really trust any of the things that we see that are happening on the internet at this point.
Well, and newspaper, traditionally, there was like an association with reporting shipping arrivals and departures. So like news is originally associated with like movement of goods in that very, like, not to say that gossip and local news as like a
No, but it would travel with shipments on trains or on boats.
right. Even that too. But as far as like newspapers and that history in America goes, it's like you know associated with shipping. And then it starts to expand into other
Like the ticker
like
tape of the stock market.
right, exactly, things like that. Other reports about uh, resource movement or allocation or supply and things like that. Um, and then it's like in the 1800s and
Like the telegraph, South Pacific Railroad, Intercontinental Telephone,
mm,
Sprint.
yeah.
It's crazy to think that they were part of like the initiative to bridge communication across our country.
Well, but it's funny, like the Pony Express is like so romanticized in American minds, but that shit lasted for like 3 years.
Well, they were like the last mile, though.
Oh
No, I'm serious. They were like the last mile of
yeah,
information
no,
delivery.
for
Like,
sure, for sure. But everybody in America knows about it as if that was like the most, as if Pony Express was like a dominant mode of information, uh, transmission for decades, and like the Pony Express rule. It's like no, it's like 3 years.
yeah, no, the telegraph really, the telegraph revolutionized communication.
Hmm.
The telegraph was our internet before the internet.
Yep. Yep.
It's interesting to me because I think was it Lumen and Cogent, two internet backbone suppliers to the world, apparently have severed their lines into Russia. And so
Also,
there,
Russia's allowing piracy now.
of course, they need to. Their economy needs to be sustained by something. I mean, how else, unless they get somehow route their AdSense dollars through, I don't know, whatever countries still have internet that they can hack through, which is probably a lot.
I've also noticed an uptick in bots trying to like get money from me. Trying to spearfish,
Oh man,
fish scam.
I love it.
Definitely an uptick.
I love it when I hear somebody give me some really, really, really American name like Michael Johnson, and they don't sound like a Michael Johnson. They don't sound like they're from this hemisphere, and they're like,
Right.
you know, it's like come on, bro, give me a name that's like at least could be reasonable with that accent.
Yeah. Now a lot of the phone scammers will do that. That are calling from call centers, pretending that they're like working for Social Security or something.
Yeah, it's like, hello, I'm calling from Social Security Association,
Yeah, and they're like clearly
and it's like and they ask you your
English
name.
is not their first language. It's like for wherever they're from, English is not their first language, and they're like, yeah, my name's Bobby. Like, no, it's not.
What I love is when they're like, could you tell me your name? It's like, you called me. Don't you know who I am?
Yeah, right. No, you tell me who's this.
You tell me who I am first, and I'll let you
Yeah,
know.
it's really funny when you call them out and then they get angry and start cursing, but they don't necessarily know how to curse.
Well, yeah, they've only heard someone yelling expletives at them. They don't actually understand.
Yeah, I think this dude to me said like, "You are go fucking yourself." And it was something along those lines where I was like, if he wasn't trying to like scam me, this would be hilarious. Like I'd be laughing with him. or or he said like, you go masturbate yourself or something like.
Oh, oh,
It was like the weirdest construction of words trying to be an insult, but then just came off like, yeah, like you said, oh, he
You know,
tried.
at one
He
point,
tried.
at one point, I
Good.
still had a little bit of compassion, and occasionally I would get somebody whose voice sounded like a little unsure, like they didn't really want to be doing it, and I would be compelled to say something like, it's like, man, I know you don't want to be doing this. You're better than this. You're a smart person. Like you can get a better job than this. But after a while, it's really easy to lose compassion for this group of people who, they're just gonna hang up and call somebody else again with the same vacant tone and ask for money, and somehow
They're
this,
sociopaths at the end of the day.
yeah,
So.
they're just still sociopaths at the end of the day. So fuck them. I hope they enjoy, whatever world they live in, because they have there are other options. They don't have to be a call center vampire.
Yep.
But to think that there are still people who fall for the call center vampire scam, it's like,
Where are these people getting money? If you're falling for that scam, where did you get the money?
where are they getting the money? The internet's been around for 30 plus years at an appreciable, accessible, like CompuServe and AOL and Prodigy level. The internet was available for 30 plus years. How is this scam still happening?
You get desperate people that just have enough money to fund the one side of the scam, and just enough desperation to take part in it. And oof, man, America makes the weirdest output of like desperation, but just enough money to be exploited for somebody to take advantage of that desperation. It's like a weird little machine. I mean, I guess it's a big machine, but
It's a huge machine.
yeah.
Somehow, simultaneously without sufficient resources, but resourced enough to be scammed.
Yeah. uh, yeah. No, because I'm like constantly amazed at how nothing is being done to stop cops murdering people. And not we, but people are just moving on as if that problem's been solved. Like, yeah, we're just gonna act like cops stop murdering people, and specifically people of color at a higher rate than their proportions of populations, or even in their confrontations, like they're confronting people and not like people are like they kill white people too. Yeah, that's not the own you think it is, but they don't do it at the same rate either. So it's like the way that like people justify murdering black people, being like, oh, they murdered white people too. Like that makes it like somehow that makes it okay. Like
They shouldn't be
all
murdering
lives can
anybody.
get murdered. Murder all lives is what they're
Well,
saying.
it's if it's not a far stretch that this is the same group of people that want to escalate towards World War III, like they're going to some party.
Yeah. These people need World War III to happen so they can get into heaven without dying. It's really fucked up.
That's not how you get virgins into heaven. That's like the opposite way of getting people into heaven.
Yeah. It's wild how much technology and by proxy science has fallen into the hands of cultists. And now we're like at the mercy of the cultists and their influence.
It just shows how accessible this extremely advanced communication technology really is. and how easily it is wielded towards people's desires, their agendas. And also to Carl Sagan's point, it sucks that people are unable to to establish their own agendas and knowledgeably question authority. I think there's too much to know.
And it does like give off Tower of Babel vibes, like frequently.
It does. Well, it fucking should, because if it takes years of dedicated study to become an expert in something, there's a freaking ivory goddamn tower that not everyone can ascend, because you have to read a shit ton, like thousands and thousands of pages before you can even pretend to know what's going on. And that's the problem, is that you've got to be a student to do that. And I don't think a lot of people actually want to continue education anymore.
It's true.
I think that we're at a point where people are satisfied with getting some kind of certification for completing 12 hours of online work, and that's the new guild.
Yeah, certificates.
There's nothing wrong with certification. Certification is perfectly awesome because it demonstrates knowledge, and it's a good thing. But it's not something.
It's not the whole certificate that's the problem. It's the way people use them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Certification as a reinforcement for fundamental education and primary education and advanced education, that's even better. But certification as a means to accessing opportunity is different.
Certification shouldn't just be gatekeeping for the sake of gatekeeping. And then there are some things that need to be gate kept for various reasons. And it's like, it's hard to know when one is one or the other.
Not everyone needs to know how to manually update a Cisco router.
Yeah.
Not everyone needs to know how to change the back end on an Oracle server or database.
Everybody needs to know, like, how to shoot a gun.
But everyone needs to know how to identify an online scam or a telephone scam.
Right, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, at this point, it should be like second nature. It should be, it's as important as turning on one's internet device, be it a computer or a phone or a tablet or a goggle system. I'm actually really curious how the augmented reality metaverse is going to play out. Are we going to see people wandering around with like big ass headsets and weird gloves, like waving their hands in the air as they wander down the street, like stopping at staring at blank walls because they can see some augmented reality video that no one else can see? Or maybe it's a giant QR code and they see the commercial that it links to it. Like at some point there's going to be some idiot who's crossing the street because their objective reality interface isn't tracking traffic or oncoming traffic, and some douchebag's going to be in their Tesla on autopilot and they're just going to plow into them. And we're going to have an augmented Tesla sandwich. Who's going to be responsible for that? Will it be the headset manufacturer? Will it be Tesla? Will it be the individual for walking out into the street? Will it be the person for not grabbing the wheel when the Tesla system said take control of the vehicle?
There are a couple cases in court right now that are going to have heavy implications in that. I mean, I don't think they've been final or had their final verdict reached yet, but it's like, yeah, those are all questions that are very, very important to ask when we're doing this whole self-driving thing.
Well, I'm also curious because I don't think that as much as I would like for the whole metaverse concept to languish, I don't think it's going anywhere. I think that the whole virtual reality thing is actually happening. It's just not widely distributed yet. Only a few people can actually take advantage of it. but I see videos of people who are wearing their NFT acquired avatars, and they've got these really advanced looking, like, you know, computer generated tune bodies that move around, that their arms reflect where their hand controllers are, and their head looks around wherever their headset looks. And they're paying good money for this, so I know it's real. And the only thing,
They didn't need to pay money for that. They could have gotten it for free, and that's the problem.
well,
Like,
that's also the problem. But I know,
like
but
the NFT stuff that is being sold as if they need to pay for it is really just like, in a lot of cases, stuff that could be accessed for free being done.
But that's the thing, is like
behind a
there's
paywall.
this whole world of activity that's happening that is kind of obfuscated, because if you don't have the headset, you're not really there. You can only see glimpses of it, snapshots, video of it, computer generated video from within the verse stuff. So I know that it's happening, and that's cool. That's fine. That's awesome. Good. But I mean, I don't know. I just see people walking around with their phones, and I know that once they have the thing built in front of their face, where they can't escape it, where they can't just look away from it because it's built into their glasses. I just don't. I think at that point you have to have automated vehicles, and you have to have a thing in the headset that like tells them to stop, like flashes bright red and says stop, and then people just stop moving
I
because
don't know if that catches on though.
Yeah.
I don't know, because like the barrier of entry for cost is like fairly high for augmented reality headsets.
Yeah.
The styles aren't being done by people who are particularly stylish, so the glass end up looking like shit. So like when they tried Google Glass, it just didn't catch on because the people that like were seen using them were seen as like creeps, and it was like obvious when people were wearing them, so people would just move away from them in public. So it became.
Do you remember reading about
became
the
almost
guy
like
in
a
the French
scarlet
McDonald's?
letter.
There was a guy in a French McDonald's who was like developing a bunch of technology, like core technology for the headsets themselves, and he had basically had mounting points built into his skull, so he could have this thing fixed to his head. And some French hooligans, not hooligans, those are soccer fans from England. Some French thug dudes tried to rip it off of his head, and they ended up like,
Oh, Jesus Christ.
severely injuring him because it was basically like, you know, a cage attached to his head.
Oh my God.
So, you know, that's an example of like cybernetic fail, like cyber augmentation going absolutely the worst possible direction. Yeah, I mean, that guy probably did look like a douchebag too. I mean, the Google glasses weren't exactly, you know, cool looking.
No.
They're like the opposite of cool looking.
Google Glass look like trash. Because even then, like the what's it called? It's not Google. There's like a Microsoft. Oh, the HoloLens.
Oh
The
yeah,
HoloLens. It looks weird as fuck. Like
those things only work like if you're in the office with your Xbox
Right.
3D Connect thing, and you have the whole room already mapped, and you don't move anything in the room.
and they were like $4,000. So I don't know if they've gone down in price at all.
Oh no, I
But
think
they
that
were-
was like, I think the developer kit was more.
Yeah, so it's like they're not gonna be accessible, and like you're saying, you can't even wear them outside right now. So the shit that
I did think it would be, the idea is cool though. You can like grab your file and then make it an object
Right.
in the room, and then you put it somewhere on the floor, and then you move like a chair over it, and then you can't see the object anymore.
yeah, if it worked really well, it would be like a cool. I don't know. I mean,
The idea is kind of
there's
fun.
something you could.
It's fun.
Yeah, you make something fun out of it and be able to do something cool with it, but it's not even necessarily.
But imagine hiding a
Super
document from
useful.
yourself underneath a cabinet or something like that. Like you put it on the floor and slide it under something. How the fuck are you going to get out without moving the cabinet type thing? I think that's like the potential for user error. with something like that, like being able to hide things from yourself in a three-dimensional object-oriented environment when we're talking about data that's normally associated with file systems. When the file system itself becomes this abstract three-dimensional environment. There's a lot to it that's really interesting, and I can generate lots of ideas, but is it ultimately, is there any like real utility? Does it make computing better? I think that's actually like that's like the important question with technology is how does this improve anything for anyone?
Right. Does just monetizing, like adding the capacity to monetize, inherently make something better? And I'm not sure it does. If anything, like
You know what dilutes it?
adding monetization at every step, like exactly might dilute it. So that's where I'm not sure the way that the Web3 development is moving is actually beneficial for uh, development of digital space. Like it's good for exploiting, but actual development, I'm not sure if that's the outcome that we get.
Yeah. It always just comes back to like, does my phone really need to talk to my refrigerator? Do they really need to be like conspiring to get me to buy shit? Does my laundry need to tell my phone when I need or when it needs to be cleaned so that I can buy some kind of cleaning agent?
Or like,
Does
if I want to
does automation actually hurt us as a society by making it possible to not even think about things?
and then as far as like avatar representation goes, if I have to pay for clothes on my physical back, should I have to pay for my avatar to look cool? But because I have to buy now digital shoes for my avatar because now the fucking NFT has been monetized at every step. Now I have to buy a Gucci jacket, even though I could just make a Gucci jacket that's like the same thing. Now I have to buy the thing to
Shouldn't you be able to like scan the QR code inside of the jacket and all of a sudden that Gucci jacket appears on your avatar? That would make sense, but
or I could just make the one on my avatar without having to buy the real one. Because that's the whole, like that's one of the best parts about digital existence is it's not dependent upon real world resources. So now we're saying we're going to arbitrarily restrict things in this specific context because in this other context, like they're not arbitrarily restricted. So we want to make it so this economy now has things that are quote unquote valuable because we're just arbitrarily restricting digital access. And then it becomes, it's just feudalizing the web now on a different layer, even though it's already feudal in many regards because of ISPs and access points. But it's like now it's just rich people who are going to own all the coolest looking shit on their avatars, with all the poor people coming in trying to get NFTs for our avatars, but then we have to buy all the cheap shit that's left over now, and we don't get the cool looking stuff yet again because now we're restricting digital existence. Now it's just arbitrarily restricted to what we can afford now, which is where I'm like, I can go on Grand Theft Auto and make my avatar look a certain way without putting real world money into it. But if this whole NFT thing is to take over, that wouldn't be the case on like Grand Theft Auto 6. If NFT gaming starts to take hold, because they were already, unique items that you buy for real world money have existed for a long time. The NFTs didn't invent that.
There's going to be a new feature in GTA 6 where when you're mugging somebody, you can say, okay, give me your clothes. Give me your watch.
Right.
Give me your shoes.
And then if somebody actually paid for that shit in the real world, now they lost it.
Yep.
Is that the?
That's
I don't know if I
does
like
that constitute actual theft? Does that constitute actual theft?
Yeah, it does.
Like,
and that's no longer fun.
Yeah. Well, there are a whole bunch of games, like there are freemium games that offer expanded content if you pay the monthly fee or pay the lifetime fee. And some games are cool where you can still grind and get those things, and other games are like dicks about it, and you can't even touch half of the content unless you pay. Like some of those games, if you lose your shit, it's gone. Like Eve Online is a great example of that. There are space battles that have been documented where the total real world value of ships is in excess of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like there are space battles between corporations where, you know, both sides lose hundreds of thousands of real world dollars built into the ships that they built based on either the time that it takes to build one of these things or the amount of money that it takes to just buy one outright. So there's already a continuum where people are willing to sacrifice real world currency for something that is temporary, that could be taken away from them at the drop of a hat because somebody else has a more advanced and more expensive spaceship. So getting mugged in GTA, that's the same thing to me. But when we think of it in terms of people in spaceships fighting over corporate rule over a section of space and the mineral rights to that space, somehow that's not mugging when someone loses a several, you know, $20, $30, $40 spaceship versus somebody getting mugged and losing their clothes, shoes, watch, hat, maybe their car in GTA 6, if that kind of thing is a thing. I think it's a scale issue. It's okay to go to war because it's war, but no, they still get up in arms about that too. So that doesn't really matter. No, but it's still a scale issue. If someone's losing a ship, if someone loses their starship, they're just a dumbass. But if someone gets mugged because somebody's aggressive and violent and on the street of was it Los Santos, then it's because that person was in the wrong part of town. How else can we rationalize this? So it's okay to lose a spaceship, but not okay to get mugged in GTA. I think in GTA, if your tune is muggable, then you are definitely in a part of the city that you're not leveled for.
I mean, even then, though, like
you can't even do that though. Maybe in online.
It just becomes this weird.
Well, that's not even fun anymore.
Yeah, it's monetizing this part of the, like, they already started taking away the fun with loot boxes, which is why European laws started going against it. It became close to gambling, and made the game so like your outcome is dependent upon if you put money in. So that's why they started to outlaw them. But then if they're basically going to do the same shit with NFTs, I'm not sure this is good. Like it seems very dystopian, and like we're headed down the cyberpunk route.
Well, they had to figure out a way to charge people to use the internet somehow.
Did they?
I mean, they didn't have to, but
yeah, it could have been a utility. They didn't have to.
But that wouldn't
actually didn't have to.
But that wouldn't be consistent with the exploitative nature of America.
It would be easier not to.
Well, yeah.
That's the craziest part about it. It's like it actually would, if they had this infrastructure that is a government utility, it's actually easier not to try to figure out how to charge people.
Yeah.
And just let them use it as a utility.
But that's like that's so many things. If they'd have just not decided to fuck with people, they would have spent less effort. Be less mad. We could be happier, and it doesn't require any effort. Man, we've been robbed. Exceptional Radio. Exceptional Randos show is produced by Studios Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org.
Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.